Good morning, world. This is Steve Rao, the host of Pod TV and Roku TV's World Edition. I greet you live from the All America city of Morrisville in the Research Triangle Park in North Carolina, the eighth largest state in the United States of America. And wherever you are in the world, we welcome you to our wonderful show where we talk about innovation, global affairs, follow up on what is going on in Ukraine, and monitor the turbulent political environment of the United States of America as we are setting into election season with primaries getting ready for the general election in November. And that's really what my monologue is based on today. On the ground here in North Carolina, we had some, not surprises, but I think validation of Donald Trump as the forebearer of his party. We're going to talk today about the primaries from Idaho and the Rust Belt states all the way to North Carolina, Indiana, and Ohio, and what the primary result, and Pennsylvania, what the primary results mean for Joe Biden's future and for Donald Trump's future. And could that perhaps be the presidential rematch that everyone is waiting for, maybe not hoping for, in 2024, if Joe Biden runs again? I want to leave my remarks today to North Carolina, which is a swing state. Let's remember that North Carolina, the largest number of unaffiliated voters in North Carolina's history, larger than Republican and Democrats combined. And this means we are what they call a purple or swing state. That's why people watch North Carolina so closely. In the past, we've elected a Democratic governor and a Republican lieutenant governor twice, Roy Cooper and Dan Forest, and now Roy Cooper and Mark Robinson. But at the end of the day, I think the greatest test is in that Ted Budd, a United States congressman, defeated former Governor Pat McCrory handily, and he was endorsed by Trump. Budd did not attend any debates, and he ran on a campaign of guns, building a wall, and making America great again. And he won, although Madison Cawthorn lost from its many, many scandals. And in the Congressional District 13, Bo Hines, a real conservative Republican, will be facing off against State Senator Wiley Nickel, a campaign that I serve on as a senior advisor. It'll be very interesting to see what happens in that congressional race in November. At the end of the day, the final thing that's interesting is John Fetterman in Pennsylvania, the liberal lieutenant governor winning the United States Senate, who will face off against Mehmet Oz, Dr. Oz, or Dave McCormick. Now, my final insight is that it's interesting with Fetterman's victory. He beat Conor Lamb, a traditional moderate Democrat. The Democratic Party lately has been nominating over the last few years these more moderate candidates who maybe are, dealing after more urban voters and getting away from the working class voters, which enabled Donald Trump to make them Trump Democrats when he won the presidency in 2016. I think that the future of the Democratic Party will be perhaps John Fetterman, who is liberal on many issues, but he's also against fracking. He's wears a beard, has a tattoo, looks very liberal, and is able to connect to those working class voters. He didn't even live in the lieutenant governor's mansion when he was a lieutenant governor. Is this perhaps a new trend of Democrats that can appeal to working class voters, more uneducated voters? Because that's been the weakness of the Democratic Party. It's the party of the urban elite. And that's what many people say they've fallen short. Well, I could go on, but only time will tell. But today on this show, for the first 20 minutes or so, we're going to analyze these primary election results in North Carolina. Sherry Beasley will be facing off against Ted Budd. Bo Hines will be facing off against Wiley Nickel. And the list goes on and on. Will the Trump-based candidates, backed candidates, have an edge? Or will it only go so far? Now let's get started. Today we have with us Mark Lee, my co-host, and Kimberly Calhoun, the founder of our network, I think is here.
And we have two others. Definitely bringing her up and everything. And we've also got Adam.
Guys, I got out of a council meeting at midnight, so my monologue wasn't as crisp as it usually was. I'm sorry, but
it was beautiful, Steve.
But I think that the bottom line is that I tend not. Oh, Adam Lamparello. I tend not to. I'm getting better. Hopefully, you all see me getting better as a moderator. But sometimes I just go with the memory and I come in. But I'd like, now that Adam Lamparello has joined us, I'd like to really analyze the primary results. And let's start with North Carolina.
We've got
Ted
one more
Bond-
person here. One more person showed up.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Sasha.
We gotta get
Sasha
Sasha.
Starr, yes. And Sasha is our Ukrainian war expert, so we're going to be talking about the war in Ukraine and what's going on. But as we wait for Sasha, welcome to the show. And by the way, Sasha Starr also hosts a show on Ukraine and Russia, and also Modern Investing with Sasha. So we'll be promoting his show. So let's get started. I want to start with North Carolina. Just first, Adam Lamparello, former Governor Pat McCrory, beaten handily by Ted Budd, who didn't show up to a debate. He ran on a campaign of guns, I'm going to build a wall, and I'm going to make America great again. And he beat the governor in a huge landslide to be a senator against former Supreme Court Chief Justice Sherry Beasley. Madison Cawthorn lost, but he was in a lot of scandals. But do you think North Carolina, do you think that that they're going to ride the Trump wave in this primary and that Trump's endorsements are helping him around the country?
Yes, I do. And I think the Democrats are in for big trouble in November when the Republicans take control of that. Why?
Yeah.
Because their leadership has been abjectly terrible, starting with the President of the United States, who is no leader and who is not fit to be in the White House, and whose policies have led to horrendous inflation, whose handling of the border has been terrible, and whose focus on social issues has been incredibly divisive. The Democrats had their opportunity to lead. They failed. And I think a lot of people are yearning for the days when Trump was in office and employment was the lowest for African Americans and Hispanics ever, when the border was more secure, when corporate taxes were lower, when the standard deduction was doubled, people were making more money and getting more jobs. We will make America great again, and it begins in November.
Mark Lee and Kimberly, what are your thoughts about and are there any other Republican candidates I'm missing that have won that we need to be talking about? We got Dr. Oz and McCormick in Pennsylvania. Any other ones that I'm missing?
I'll let Mark take this lead.
I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I'm trying to remember if there were any that were making big noise. I know that actually one of our candidates has been on the show with their election won't actually be till August, because definitely the primaries are in August. So our candidate that has appeared a couple of times on our show, and particularly on the economic show, and I believe she's also been on the Media Monday, and that is Ms. Skinner. She will not be coming up till August because theirs was pushed back till August, and all along those lines. I do know that some of the other candidates that we've had definitely got pretty much slaughtered, because I do know that Rand Paul just pretty much hit all of his opposition, including Mr. Paul, who's been on the show, and that was like one of those handy victories for Rand. But he is an established candidate and has been one of those established candidates for a number of years. So I think it's going to take a really decisive effort to ever get Rand out of office. And there's the whole conversations around term limits, and that's actually one of the conversations that's been going on as well. I believe Morgan also came in the second, even though for a young candidate, that's not bad for her first time, and she's been on past shows as well. So definitely we've seen some of our candidates that have appeared on shows here not do all that well, but we'll see what happens. One of the conversations that has come up, and I'd love to hear Adam's thoughts about this, as he says that he's ready for the return of Trump, and some people are, some people are not. And all along those lines, a certain major rapper that also used to have some interesting words about Trump has now had some interesting words about Twitter, and I'll get to that in a second as well. But what are your thoughts around the term limits? Because I personally think that part of the problem, whether it's Republican or Democrats, is when we have people, and I would even say on the mayor level as well, that are in office for 20, 30, 40, 50, however many years they want to stay there and everything. And then they become more subject to those kind of power plays that you're talking about from the lobbies, whether that's the gun lobby, whether that's the environmental lobbies. I think the lobbies come from both the right and the left, and definitely they have a lot of sway. And I think part of the problem is that folks can get in office and stay in office forever. And I know that that is part of the issue, and I think you'll agree with me on Mr. Biden, because he is a career politician and all along those lines. But Adam, your thoughts?
Well, my thought is that you're correct. absolutely that Joe Biden is a career politician who believes what anybody tells him to believe at a particular point in time. He's more like a professional actor than he is a leader. As far as term limits go, in 1990, in United States versus Thornton, the Supreme Court held in a 5-4 decision authored by Clarence Thomas that term limits were unconstitutional. I think that decision was wrong. I think term limits are a good thing. I think it's good for democracy. I think it's good to get new leaders, fresh leaders in Congress with new ideas. When you look at, for example, Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer, who are essentially entrenched in their seats with no ability to unseat them, that's not good for democracy. So I would favor term limits. However, I would not favor term limits for Donald Trump. I would have him in office forever. And I would have some people who are good leaders in there forever, because when you look at what Donald Trump did as president, not only was the economy fantastic, the unemployment rate incredibly low, 2 Supreme Court justices who were originalists appointed to the court, the border secure, the First Step Act passed, America was doing great. Joe Biden comes in, and predictably, due to the Democratic policies, look at what we have.
Before we go to
Adam, one question to you, may I?
Again, I look forward to leading that. And as far as Mr. Trump goes, I want to speak directly to him. When he gets reelected, I expect a position in his administration.
Adam, one question to you.
Sasha.
If he is indeed so great as you believe, how he could be twice impeached, lose Senate, the House, the presidency, and people who would think that he's so great, they should have reelected him, period. 75%, 25% for Biden. But that didn't happen. How would you do that?
Yeah, and Adam, I'm going to defend him. I mean, that is true. There's only a few presidents that haven't been reelected in the last 40 years. And Donald Trump's he's a loser. He lost. I mean, so, how do you defend that?
I want to add something here as well is why do we have to have Trump again? Why can't the Republican Party find somebody that is far better than what Trump was or is without so much contention riding on his coattails? I mean, I would think, given that we have a couple of years to work here, that there could be somebody a lot more promising than Trump. I mean, I thought Trump was on the fence anyway, but can we not find somebody that has a little more better business ethics, some better business background, rather than, filing bankruptcy every time he sees it?
Two things.
Yeah, we have the two things right here.
Number one.
Lamparello and Steve, who have both said that they would be interested in running for national office. So that's both of them.
Well,
yes.
Look at Sasha.
All I'll say in response to Sasha is I agree with Sasha that I don't think Trump was so great or so perfect. In fact, I didn't even vote for him. But when I look back on his presidency, I think his policies were very effective. And I think he was a businessman. And a businessman in the White House is a good thing. His policies were strong. The economy was strong. The border was secure. He enacted criminal justice reform. Unemployment for African Americans and Hispanics was at its lowest rate ever. Now, on the other hand, his personality, his tweeting was disgraceful. So he's far from perfect, but he's better than what we have now. And if Kimberly is asking, is there someone better than DeSantis, than Trump? I would say DeSantis from Florida or me.
Yes. You got my vote, Adam.
Kim, now I would like to address your comment. You're asking why they cannot find anybody better than Trump. That's question number one. Well, according to what Adam just said earlier, there is no one who's better than Trump. It's impossible to find. There is no one in the world better than Trump. Okay. Number two issue. In about 2016, the Republican Party was taken hostage by Trump and his relatives. So there is no Republican Party per se anymore. It's a party of Trump. Now, if Republican Party will disobey him and will start pushing independent candidates and start to fight for his nomination or so on, he will very quickly run away, organize his own new party, and will go into election with his new party by dividing completely Republican electorate and assuring very easy victory for Democrats, even if it's Joe Biden. Even his rating will be 5%, 3%, 0.5%, or it doesn't matter. Mathematically, once Republican vote is split, Democrats win easily. Okay, that's what's happened in 1992.
Well,
And,
it's
and,
also-
and before we go to the war in Ukraine, just a couple of observations. So I think as we go into these primary elections, we see that Trump is effective in his endorsements with, Ted Budd, for example. But in states like Idaho, where Brad Little beat a Trump-backed lieutenant governor, I can't remember the name, but he won. And then also, so in some states it's worked, in some states it hasn't. But I think all in all, it does look like the candidates that are getting endorsed by Trump are winning the nominations. Now, the test is, will they defeat the Democrats in the general? And what kind of Democrats can defeat these Trump-backed candidates? The good news for Democrats, however, is that it does look like, for example, in North Carolina, the moderate Democrat Valerie Fouché, state senator, defeated a very progressive Democrat, Nida Alam, who was backed by Bernie and Elizabeth Warren and all the progressives, AOC, and was handily defeated by Fouché, who was backed by Israeli PAC, lots of outside money coming in, and she won. So maybe the Democrats are getting it. Maybe they realize, look, if we're going to face off these conservatives, we've got to get more moderates to win. Now, well, but anyway, that's our political analysis. We'll come back later in the show and talk about the other ones around the country. Maybe we'll do that in the next show. But real quickly, war in Ukraine. Sasha, tell us what's going on in Ukraine.
What's going on in Ukraine is a surprise to all civilized world. A little country with almost no budget, no military background, defeating second largest, I wouldn't say strongest, but at least largest country in the world, or army in the world, that being Russia. And each day, I don't know, some people think that it will prolong war for years or so. How can you see Ukraine will not defeat Russia in next probably month, maximum 2 months, because they're getting now so much American and Western weapons. They're already begging, stop sending them. We don't have space to park these weapons. We have so many of them, and they are incredibly effective. Take a very simple example. So American built artillery can shell Russians on a distance of, say, 50 kilometers. Now, Russian same artillery can hit only up to 40 kilometers. So once you move back 10 kilometers, so you can unpunishedly inflict heavy losses on Russians, while Russians cannot do the same to you. So this is a simple math. If you take, 50, it's a 50, minus 40, it's a 40, you will have 10. So 10 kilometers cannot be compensated in no way. The another thing is a rare stupidity of Russian forces. A couple of days ago, there was a situation when Russians were trying to force the river. Small river, nothing to talk about. It's not Mississippi or Amazon river. It's nothing. Just you can probably just walk around. So what's happened? So they sent the first wave of their forces. Ukrainians killed all of them. No one came out alive. Believe it or not, in 40 minutes, in the same place exactly, there's a second wave, which were all built, exterminated, killed. No, nothing is there. Believe it or not, in another 40 minutes, they sent third wave in exactly the same place, killed all of them. And it continued 9 times in the same place. All of these people were killed.
Yeah, it
Now,
doesn't sound
there
like the
was
greatest tragedy in the world.
there were very interesting
But
investigation in the background how that could really happen. Apparently, Putin sent one new general who's a complete human garbage, really, what to say about him. Because once in 2015 in the Donbass, he was making an order that led to atrocities, and a lot of Russian people were killed. So the soldiers themselves, they caught him and wounded him in his leg and his arm and so on. What he did, he went back to Moscow and said that he was fighting with Ukrainians and he was wounded. So he immediately got a hero status, and now Putin sent him over there. But apparently, all this operation is being now conducted by Putin himself. He is watching this large map of Ukraine, and he put this little marks where this fighters have to be located and where they have to cross, and they have to put little lines of the attack. So apparently, because it was coming from Putin himself, these local generals and they could not disobey his orders. That's why they were keep sending people being
But
killed 100% just because it's a worse. The worst than that would be to disobey Mr. Putin's order. That's how it
well, I
works.
think but I think the war is really headed. I mean, right now, the way we look at it, he's given up on the western part. He's focusing on Ukraine, the Donbass region, like you said. He's going through a lot of his military, about a third of his military, losing his generals, and not looking good for him. But I mean, he does have more resources, more weapons. I think the key is oil, cutting him off from oil, and eventually, Sasha, do you think that there's an increasing likelihood that he can be just taken out by someone within his own Russian government,
Yes,
or
Gosh, I
I
hope
agree
not.
with you, Stephen. I agree with you because whoever will come on in his place, even if it will be total moron, even worse than Putin himself, but it will be optically much easier to make some kind of agreement with him than Putin himself. See, Putin now is wasted material. I mean, it's he had a huge advantage. He built the aura of Russia being a great militaristic power. They have all this nuclear weapons and so on. And he played it so skillfully that just 2 months ago, all the West was paranoid about Putin is using his, he has a red button. He's gonna use it. Oh my God, it's gonna be maybe it will be just tactical nuclear war. Oh no. It's be all out war. We're all going to be killed. Come on, you're grown up people. You don't you understand that you all die sooner or later? What makes a difference? You'll die, so you'll live another 10, 15 years, or you'll die maybe in next 10 months. What makes a difference, really? There is no difference whatsoever. So once West realized that, all of a sudden they lost any fear of Putin with his stupid red button, that most likely that red button even doesn't work. It still remains to be seen. A, if it works. B, if the people in next to the command, you know how the red button works. It generates codes. These codes have to be accepted by lower in commands. They have to generate new codes which are matching the old codes, and all that have to send to a people who actually send the button that makes all this missile fly. So these people have to generate yet new code that matches the other two codes, and only then they have a sign. The missiles are ready to be unloaded. Okay, so now you can actually launch the missiles. If they're working, if all these codes are working, if all these buttons are working, and if people the most important thing.
Well, it is.
Down the line are willing to sacrifice their own lives, their families, and everybody else. If all that works, which I doubt very, very much, only then there could be.
But we were played by. I mean, but the bottom line is this: the way I look at it, because I did watch before we get into some national issues. I did watch Fareed Zakaria's special Inside the Mind of Putin, which I would recommend to everybody on the show, particularly those on the international show, your show, Sasha. But the bottom line is this: we were sort of played by Putin, right? I mean, he was, he often said that the greatest geopolitical catastrophe.
Steve, what's new? We've been played by military people and
no, but
dictators for decades.
Mark, let me finish. Let me finish my point.
We were played by a lot of folks.
Let me finish my point. When he said the greatest geopolitical disaster in the history of Russia was the fall of the Soviet Empire, right? Let's not forget that his passion for Ukraine is because it's the home of the original Russian czars. Correct me if I'm mistaken, right? The oldest territory is Ukraine. And so he wanted to get that part. He wants to return back to the Russia czar time, right? The imperial Russia. And when his economy started getting better, he was being nice to the West, right? Because he needed our support. And now that he got all rich and powerful, he's going back to what he always wanted, which is imperial Russia. So honestly, we should have seen this coming. And now this guy is, I think, should be taken out. I know you can't take out a military head of state, but I think he should be taken out. I mean, he's no different than Hitler, bin Laden.
Oh my gosh! I cannot believe.
Hold on a second. I want to hear
Why
what
not?
Alex has to say.
I agree with you. I just text that. I agree with you. He's no different than Hitler.
Oh my
what do you have to say,
I cannot
Adam?
believe that we are spending this episode insulting Mr. Putin, who has
Why
been
not?
a fine leader for Russia. And in fact, let's
He's a
get the
murderer.
facts straight.
He's a
Ukraine
murderer.
is an absolute corrupt.
He's a murderer.
He's a
He's a
murderer.
murderer.
Oh, so I guess George W. Bush was in Iraq. LBJ was in Vietnam. I could go on, but
No, but
cannot
he's
believe- first of all,
murdering innocent civilians and
He's
children.
not murdering
I mean,
innocent civilians. First of all,
yes,
Ukraine-
he is. See the pictures, Adam. Don't come on.
Hey, a
He's
picture
murdering.
speaks
He's
1,000
murdering
words.
innocent
But-
civilians. He should be tortured
First of
and
all,
put to death.
Ukraine is an absolute
should be
corrupt
put to death.
cesspool of a nation.
Putin should be
Okay.
put to death.
Number two, the reason that Russia went to war is because of NATO expansion and trying to marginalize Russia completely, okay? And because of Ukraine's corruption and some of the atrocities that Ukrainians have committed. This idea that Ukraine is good is a bunch of BS. It is probably the capital of corruption. And Mr. Putin has been a good leader. I have supported Russia in the past, and I will not vilify Mr. Putin on this program.
Sasha, you're on mute.
Well, I do have hold on a second. I got a question for
I
actually.
want
about this one.
to correct
No, hold on.
a
Sasha,
little.
The
I'm-
references are very troubling.
But,
No, I got a question I want to.
perhaps we can get Putin to come on and give his position like he
That would
does
be an
with
honor.
just his own TV station in Russia and how he controls their minds because they don't get to see the same news that we get. Having known some people from the Ukraine area, I guess I'm more in support of an anti-attack against another country. If you are a great leader, you don't have to do that. You lead, okay? But you don't have to commence war on somebody. Ukraine was not killing people. Ukraine was just minding their own business. Just because they get into a dispute about whatever it was they were disputing, but men do that, and their first knee reaction is to go to war. I mean, they go to war over women. They go to war over so many different things. But Russia should have just sat quiet and continue doing what they do and just do good things rather than commence a war. I think that they are murderers. I think that they are going in and behaving just as bad as some of the wars that we have seen in our past history. I think in this day and time, there is a better way to address issues than with so much aggression and hate and with guns. I mean, when somebody comes in to a store and shoots up everyone, Do they have a right to do that just because they didn't like the people and they wanted to marginalize their position? No. I know a good leader shouldn't have to do that. A good leader leads, a good leader sets examples, and then people will follow them. Putin is not a good leader.
Well, the only thing I would say to that is,
but I do got a question for Sasha really quickly, because I did read something that I thought was brilliant in the sense of what the Ukrainians have done and everything, even though some folks would say that it is a form of military campaigns that people don't like, and sometimes the Geneva Convention doesn't even like it as well. And that is the whole concept, not just of chemical warfare, but psychological warfare. Because apparently, you were talking about all those soldiers that have been killed by that were Russian soldiers. Apparently, the Ukrainians said, hey, guess what? It's the modern day. We've got their addresses. We've got the addresses of their family. Putin is saying these folks are not killed. So how about we send them pictures of their bodies? So that's literally what he's done. Apparently, he has sent some pictures of the bodies to the people in Russia, somehow finding the Russian mothers and the Russian fathers and other family members, maybe even the wives and husbands' addresses, and saying, here, remember Mr. Putin? He said that they weren't dead. Here's a picture. They looked dead to me. And all of that. So what is your thought about this whole concept of psychological warfare? And I'm sure that Mr. Putin has got some psychological warfare going on.
Okay, Mark,
his
thank
end.
you. I've mentioned several times that there are three kinds of wars are being fought. One is social media, one is public opinion, and the actual war. However, I want to go a little bit further than that. The actual war will be lost by Russia and very quickly, and the other wars are being lost just as well. I want to mention that in the last 20 years or so, since Putin came to power, Russia become by far the most evil country in the world. In fact, it's more evil than all other countries like North Korea, Iran, or anybody else combined. Why? Number one, Russia is supreme corrupted country, and it sells and inflicts all the corruption around the world, including United States, by the way, too. They have all those useful idiots who are repeating how great Putin is, how great Russia is, and all of stuff. What are you going to tell me? Russia is a country of Dostoevsky and Tchaikovsky and all that. What these present murderers have to do with the great Russian culture? Nothing at all. They never read Dostoevsky or Turgenev or anybody else. They never listened to music of Tchaikovsky. They're listening to their stupid patriotic songs. That's what they are. They are bringing to the world. There is nothing that they can bring to the world, something nice, something good, something useful. They're bringing war, weapons. They're weaponizing energy markets, and they are conducting their foreign policy from the position of their own strength, and they're buying politicians and businessmen and people of influence around the world. This is what they're doing. Enough is enough. Russia has to be taken out from the world civilization. Becoming giant North Korea. Do whatever you want to do inside your stupid country. And that's the end of story. Thank you, Adam.
No, I hear what you're saying, but I did have a question for everybody based on what Sasha just said. Sasha said that there was some political maneuvering going on by the Russian leadership, and I'm not arguing with that. I definitely see that, and I've seen that even studying the news and everything. He also mentioned on past shows about some of the corruption of the society in Russia and what it used to be and what it is now, and all along those lines. We could also add in political prisoners. We could add in a part of the world that wants to be independently free. I will then turn that to the United States. Don't we have people doing the same thing here in the United States and other parts of the West? Don't we have political prisoners, even though we don't like to admit it? But we do have political prisoners because they're like members of the Black Panthers and other things that, if you think about it, they're really political prisoners and all of that. And don't we have people that have talked about having their own independence and things? Now, whether we want to have that happen or not, whether we want Puerto Rico to be a 51st state, or whether we want it to be independent, whether we even want the DC to be a 51st state or 52nd. And we can even go into some other parts of the world as well that are technically part of our protectorate and all along those lines. So what are y'all's thoughts about that? Because some of the issues that you are bringing up, and maybe Steve wants to answer this, I would say that they could also be put back on the front of the United States as well.
What you talking about? Just foreign policy?
Foreign policy, human rights violations is part of the things that we talk about with Russia and other places, including North Korea and China. A number of the other things that we kind of get on Russia about are kind of the same thing.
Thank you, Mark.
Well, real quickly, I'll take a stab at it. I mean, the International Declaration of Human Rights, lays out the basic fundamental human rights: the right to vote, the right to assemble freely, the right to say what you want without feeling like you're going to get tortured, the right to vote. These basic fundamental rights, but they're hard to enforce. We are actually blessed in the United States to honor these rights through not only our own Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, which I believe was not only a promise to the American people, but a challenge, whether we could work together to make the union a more perfect union, as President Obama often reminded us. America is not perfect, but we've got a good balance, a strong government to prevent us, to guide us through chaotic times, possibly, but a government that represents the civil liberties and freedoms of society. What we find out is just putting military forces somewhere doesn't mean that you're automatically going to turn on human rights and they're going to be enforced. We have a lot of democratically elected nations like Hungary, for example, Turkey. These are dictators that are running authoritarian governments. Maybe it's because it's easier. Democracy, as Andrew Shepard said, my favorite president and the American president, it's advanced citizenship. You got to want it real bad. Remember when Michael Douglas said that? How do you respect? How do you burn a flag in front of a man who spent his life defending it? That's the beauty of America, right? Well, you can't do that in China. You can't do that in Russia. You can't do that in North Korea. You can't do that in Hungary. You can't do that in Turkey. You'll be killed, right? So I don't know. That's just as a political commentator.
But Steve, and I'd love to hear maybe even Kim's kind of thoughts about this as well. I was reading a newspaper article, or maybe it was an online post yesterday, and it's about a young lady who lost her husband, who was a SEAL operator. Because part of what happened is he got really caught up in the whole military complex and the whole military way of living here in the United States, and could never really adjust. We've talked a couple of times on this show about mental health, so he could never really adjust back to getting away from that whole military framework. Had 2 kids, and in the end of the day, despite her pleading, showed her a gun that he possessed and took his life and all of that. And now her, I think it's her brother, is formed an organization that is trying to address that with those that are in those high-end military jobs, like the SEALs and things of that nature. And that's just one branch of the military. So I think that even in our own society, we are failing our veterans, and the way that we treat them and the way we treat their mental health and all of that. I was very touched by the story, as you can tell, when I was reading it and all of that. But I know that that's a passion of yours, Kim, mental health and the way that we treat folks and all of that. So I don't know if you got any thoughts about what I just outlined.
As far as the mental health and everything, I mean, we just got a lot going on here, and to be in the midst of watching people being murdered in their own streets and their livelihoods being stripped and taken away from them for no good reason is just, to me, I think Putin has mental illness, but I think that at the end of the day, he is doing what he thinks and believes is right. I don't know any reason why you would go in with a gun and just start shooting people or sending people in to shoot people when we say it's right. Because when someone goes into a store here or goes and does a mass shooting, we say they're wrong, right? They have a mental illness. So I think anytime you try to take over with force, just like domestic violence, when you try to use bullying and forcefulness, you've got a mental problem. I think Putin needs some help. Maybe an angel will go and visit him and talk to him and convince him that he needs to stop killing people. I don't think the Ukrainians are bad people. I don't think that they did anything wrong. I think they are just like you and me. They just want to live in peace. And I think Putin just can't let people live in peace. He's like Hitler, you know. He got a whiff of power and realized he can go and pull the gun and shoot people. It's kind of like he sat there and said, I could go into the middle of, you know, the New York City and Times Square and start shooting people. Nobody will do anything to me. You know, it's you get this mental power thing going on. So I you know, but we've got a lot of problems in our own country that we need to be focused on. And, you know, I'll pass this back to Steve to kind of find another way we can discuss this.
Can I say?
Well,
definitely.
well, I think first
Yeah,
we'll end it with this before we go to a couple of other issues. But at the end of the day, I think that we have to first of all, there's value in all human life, sanctity of human life, and that living in peace, and that no one ruler or dictator has the right to just kill innocent people because of whatever political agenda that he has. The United States of America stood off to the terrible dictatorship of Adolf Hitler, and we stopped World War II. We stopped Nazi Germany, and we created the largest post-industrial expansion in the history of the world, post-World War II. We always remember the greatest generation. So, you know, at the end of the day, Kimberly, the way I would close out on this topic is that, you know, I think we have to make sure that we have foreign policies that are proactive in preventing these kind of terrorists to occur. But at the same time, you know, right now we're in a Cold War, appeasement without really calling it so, because we don't want to confront a nuclear power. So we're doing sanctions, we're doing all these things, but it's not deterring what he wants, which is Imperial Russia back at all costs. And he's willing to pay the price of human life to achieve his goal. And I think that, and I'll say that there's people in Russia that are good people that are working. Not everyone believes in Putin, right? But they don't have a choice, because if they publicly express their opinion, he murders them.
Exactly.
Can I
Right?
say one thing?
Yeah.
Please, Adam.
I'm really honestly so sick and tired of Americans thinking that they are so morally superior. This is the country that went into Vietnam and murdered hundreds of thousands. This is the country that dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This is the country that went into Iraq and killed over 100,000 women and children. This country is the number one poster child for imperialism and invading other countries. As far as Russia goes, the situation is much more complicated than our media would have you believe. Okay? Ukraine
Tell us
is
more
a
about the
cesspool of
complications.
corruption. It is a
Adam, tell
cesspool.
us about the complications that justify invading the innocent other country and killing thousands and thousands of people and destroying the cities, destroying the buildings, and
Because of the eastward expansion of NATO and the marginalization of Russia. And it's
Russia
much more
has to be.
complicated than
Russia
you guys to
doesn't bring
condemn the United
anything
States
good
for our
to the world.
genocides that we've
It's an
committed.
evil
throughout our history.
empire. That's what Ronald Reagan said
Not to
in
mention
the 80s.
slavery.
And today it's even much worse than USSR. So how it can
The
be
USSR is not
Yeah,
worse
I
than the
just-
United States
taken out
at all.
completely.
I just
We
want
have
to
no
say,
superiority.
you know,
With our
just
history of
because
war,
we behaved poorly in the past, does
behave
that
poorly.
give Russia the right
Millions
to
of dead.
behave that way? Does it give someone else the right to take a gun in?
We
and
have no
kill
right to
everybody?
criticize Russia.
Yes,
It does
we
give us the
not
right,
only
because I
criticize,
didn't make those
we have
decisions
to
for
take
the
Russia
U.S.
out, period.
And Ukraine
There
is
should
a
be
corrupt
no Russia.
cesspool.
Just go back, become a giant North Korea, and do something, whatever you want
It's
to
not
do
North
inside.
Korea. It's not even
Stop
close to
that.
North
We
Korea.
don't need your energy.
We're
We
not as
don't
free
need
as
your
you think we are in
corruption.
the
We
US
don't
with the
need your
media that we
crooked
have.
politicians. Nothing. And Donald Trump, if he wants, he could go and join Putin over there and
He can
advise.
move.
I will stand with Russia on this show, and I will condemn the U.S. for the genocides they've committed throughout history that have cost millions of lives and far more than any lives Russia has ever cost.
No,
This
that's
American
okay.
assessment
You
of
can
the
be
world
for Russia.
priority is
You know,
nonsense.
Russians already created enough useful idiots around the world. So if
I'm
you
not
want
a
to
useful
join them,
idiot.
please yourself. I have no problem with that.
I just don't.
I I
Sasha,
I
hold on a
I'm
second.
not
Hey,
afraid
condemn
to
the
Sasha,
tell the
U.S.
truth about the United
hold on a
States.
second. Sasha and Adam,
for
just calm
I
down. I
condemn
know
the
that.
U.S. for what they have done in the past. I agree. We had no right to do that. But again, that gives we take history, we learn from it, and we move forward. And that does not give another country the right to do those things. It doesn't.
You can
We
blame
No,
need to
NATO for
learn
why
and
it's
grow
worse.
up as a world. We
no,
need to learn and
no.
grow up.
I hear what you're saying, Kim,
So,
and I agree with you. I agree with what you're saying, but I do wonder, particularly if Trump comes back in office, and I know what you just said, Adam, that you would be for that and everything, and he talked about his protecting the borders and all of that. I'm not 100% sure about that. I need to do a little bit more research and all of that because there have been some things that have gone on the borders that I have not been um, totally approving of, and that's under both administrations, Democratic and Republican, and all of that. But there was a time of the era when we were definitely talking about colonialism and imperialism. There was like a time that there were four major countries, London or England being one of them, of course, America, some people would argue being another, France being another, and definitely they kind of divided the world up in terms of having control. There were some people that would argue that that is what is going on now, and that one of those powers is actually kind of like grabbing a lot of the power and the influence in the other countries, and it's neither America or Russia. It's actually China. And some people will be wondering what their whole concept is and what they are thinking of the war. But is there a fear in our audience here that we are heading back toward a reversion in history of imperialism and of us kind of like dividing the country up by these power brokers, whoever the power brokers are, and all of that? And at the end of the day, do we even really know who the power brokers are? But anybody have any thoughts on that?
we'll give that to Steve. That's a good question.
Go ahead and repeat that question, Mark.
I was going to just say the
Are
same
we
thing.
heading back to new imperialism and a new division of the world according to geopolitical powers, similar to what was going on in old imperialism when the country and the world was kind of divided among the powers of, say, France, Spain, London, or
Well,
England, I should say.
yeah,
There were
I
a
could
couple
speak
of
to
other
that
players in
clearly.
there
Yes,
as well.
there's been a shift in there's been a rise in authoritarianism and nationalism around the world. Let's start. It's going on in India, obviously Britain, much of Europe, other parts of the world. We don't know what's fueling this nationalism, but it is sort of a return back to kind of the isolationist foreign policies which existed pre World War II. And what brought the world together and united the Western Allies was World War One, and then shortly after World War II. So I think I don't understand what's driving it. I've talked to Wilmer Leon on Sirius XM, and he believes that sometimes democracy just is hard to enforce and make work, and so it's just easier to be one dictator where you just say this is the leader that's going to take care of you, he's going to get you food, he's going to get you protection. It just makes it easier to do that, and I think to answer your question, I would just agree with it that I think that it's a trend that's occurring all over the world. And my political theory behind it, take India, for example. Okay. So, India, my parents grew up in India. They were born there, brought up there, came here in the 1960s. India didn't really favor one religion over the other. But today, the Modi government is doing certain things that are treating Muslims differently and Christians differently. And the doctrine is called Hindutva, and it means we're a Hindu national state. Now, my dad's best friend is Catholic from India. They're from Madras, Tamil Nadu, Chennai, and Mangalore, and it's strange. But I met Modi in 2007 when he was the chief minister, and I don't really believe he's a racist or a bigot or looking down on others. You know what I think his strategy is? Unifying India, because India is 18 different states, each with its own language and music. And now when you go to India, their infrastructure is better than the United States. They're building better roads, they're building better airports, they're building better ports. They have more internet access in India than the United States. They got more technology and wiring going on there because he's been able to unify the country to say, look, we're nationalism, right? So now the states, which wouldn't work with the central government, are now working with the central government. So perhaps nationalism is a way of getting an economy moving again. I don't know why it's happening, but yes, I think you are seeing a rise of colonialism and imperialism.
Steve brings up a really good point that I just want to briefly touch on. I don't understand why everybody thinks democracy is such a good thing. Democracy is ruled by idiots. Look who's going to the voting booth. Look who we're electing. And democracy eventually eats itself alive, which is exactly what's happening here. Let me turn to my favorite country, Singapore. In Singapore, you have what's called a benevolent dictatorship. Everyone gets free education, free healthcare, and free housing. And there's flowers on every street. It's such a beautiful place with no crime. Benevolent dictatorships are the way to go. Democracy is always destined to destroy itself, and you're seeing it because it's ruled by idiots. And that, by that, I mean,
speaking of idiots, and I really want to get to that, right?
What?
No, I hear what you're saying, and you brought that up before and everything. And before we get to it, and I know Steve's going to close out very shortly. This has been a very lively discussion. But one of the other things I was going to say, just to bring up one other news item, because we know we've talked about Mr. Musk and his purchase of Twitter. And I know some folks have said, I think it was you, Adam, that I should be really proud since he is actually African American, since he is originally from South Africa and all of that. And therefore, even though he doesn't identify that way, that he is technically African American. Well, he's been completed. He's having somebody to say, hey, hold on a second. I got a lot of money too. I may not have as much as you. You bring the fire and I'll bring the smoke or something like that. But apparently Snoop Dogg is saying, hey, I might want to buy Twitter as well. So what are your thoughts about this? Because he's put it out there on social media. Apparently Elon Musk has answered him and said, hey, if you can do it, come for it. And all of that basically is what it amounts to. But is we're going to lose Twitter to Elon Musk, and instead will Twitter be controlled by Snoop Dogg, who I also understand can sometimes be a fan of Mr. Trump, so maybe he also is going to let Trump back on Twitter as well. So what is your thoughts about Snoop Dogg being the owner of Twitter, because he has said that he's coming from Musk? Adam, you got any thoughts?
Oh, me? I think social media generally is terrible. I think Twitter is among the worst offenders because it allows absolute idiots to go there and spew misinformation and disinformation. What I would say is, no matter who owns it, Twitter is the marketplace, is the modern day marketplace of ideas, and we should be respecting the First Amendment and be respecting unpopular opinions. The problem I have is I don't even think Twitter should exist. I think it's terribly destructive to our society because it gives a voice to terrible people to say terrible things. And I think social media is part of the reason our country is divided. So my opinion is I don't care who owns it. I think it should be completely abolished.
What do you think about that, Kim? Are you ready to abolish Twitter? And then while you're at it, are you going to abolish? Because I'm actually a big fan, as y'all know, even though I've not been on it now for a couple of months, but I am a fan of the Clubhouse app. And yes, there are a lot of misinformation in that as well. But if you're smart, you listen to it and you listen to the kind of viewpoints and realize when people are talking insanity. If they're talking insanity, you just call them out on it if you feel like it, or you just let them have their insane moments and all of that. But well, she just did. What's your thoughts, Kim? What are your thoughts about Twitter and the Clubhouse? Should we abolish them?
If you do that, then you abolish our freedom of speech. I think social media has kind of, demolished what I call ethics in journalism. You have to be very, very careful out there what you hear and see. But I think Twitter showed us, exactly how insane Trump can be and how unethical he can be. And I find it so hilarious how people will sit there and tell you he's unethical, he has no control, yet I'll vote for him for president rather than find a Republican that is, ethical, has self-control. So I think Twitter has shown us the true person that people really are, because people will get out there and just start Twittering. And I find it interesting, and I think we need to keep some of these elements going. Many countries ban these social media sites so that they can control the minds of the people. Is democracy good? I think there's good and bad in every political platform that's out there. So I think that people just need to. Eventually, maybe this world will mature, and we can become united as people and not as leaders who want to be dictators. I do see, that there's a sense of certain peace in some countries that are ruled by one person. But that's not why we started America. And I think that Twitter and all the social media is full of a lot of noise, and it became something more than what the people invented it to be. And I think people just need to learn how to, just watch it. I mean, it showed me who Trump really was, and and to me, if you think somebody is insane, unethical, has no self control, I really don't know how you can love them and want them for a president. But it just showed me how insane people can be. Yeah, maybe let's keep it, because I use it as a rule of thumb. When I look at people, I go, oh, okay, that's how they roll. So good question, Mark. But I know that we're coming near the end of the hour.
Yeah, we are near the end of the hour. I was just ready to ask Sasha really quickly who he's got on his show, and if you can give me a quick answer, and then I know that Steve's going to do his usual closeout. But when 1 o'clock, we've got the investment show where we can learn how to invest all that money that we're saving. So who is our special guest, Sasha, on that show in about 2 hours?
Yes, I will have a special guest who wrote books about investing. His name is Milan. He's a dentist. He's a Dr. Milan Sombra. And this one of his books, Monday Morning Millionaire. Partly it's funny what he believes that he can teach that system to any fourth grade student, really. It's a very, very simple system on investment. However, it requires a lot of discipline and very strong will, if you want, because a lot of people get astray when they're becoming somewhat overly aggressive, extravagant, and trying to do some funny things, and that they're getting astray. Then they want to get even, and they want to make some fabulous trades to get back whatever they lost, and that's even more disastrous thing. So one thing leads to another. It's very interesting. I'm looking forward to this program, and we'll see. We'll go from there. Okay, I invite everybody on the show, so please enjoy and also learn something.
Sounds great.
So
Steve,
it's time
I'm
for our
talking to you to
closeout.
get us all out of here.
Yeah, we forgot to mention that 1.2 million people have been out of school since 2020 because of COVID, either dropping out. And Pfizer just announced their boosters for children ages 5 through 11. And we've surpassed 1 million COVID deaths in the United States. So we pray for any family who's lost a loved one. My final take is, as we once again witness another senseless gun violence attack in New York, we often forget to honor those who died or just think about them. So I was reading about them in the paper, and I'm just going to name them today as we end the show. Roberta Drury of Buffalo, New York, age 32. Margus Morrison of Buffalo, 52. Andre McNeil of New York, 53. Aaron Salter of Lockport, New York, 55. Gerald Towley of Buffalo, New York, 62. Celestine Cheney, age 65. Howerson Patterson, age 67. Catherine Massey, 72. Pearl Young of Buffalo, 77. And Ruth Whitfield. And the reason I did this as we close out the show is we pray for their families. We pray for their loved ones. And we often forget that behind every story that we read and statistic, there is a real person. A mother, a father, a brother, a sister, a daughter, a son, who will no longer see a sunrise or a sunset, will not be able to enjoy those small things that we enjoy every day, even taking a breath and just enjoying some fresh air and some laughter and family time with our families because of a senseless gun attack. There's no solution right now, but I think we need to work together to figure out how we can prevent these tragedies from happening. We pray for them, and we'll be talking about this on the show in a respectful manner, because definitely something isn't right in our country when 10 people lose their lives just by shopping in the supermarket, wanting to go back and see their families. From our family to yours, we wish you all the best wherever you are in the country or the world. And we'll be back tomorrow for another edition of Pod TV, Roku TV's World Edition. Thank you. This is Steve Rao, May 18th, signing off. Just like my hero, Walter Cronkite. That's the way it is. Thank you.
Mark, can you hear me?
Hold on.
Mark?
Hold on.
Oh. Mark, can you hear me?